Hello, welcome to the very first episode of a brand new show called Exploring DC. My name is Josh Dobson. I ran an Instagram account called DC TV Center for quite a few years, and the goal with that account was always to talk about DC on television and expand people's horizons. And I shut that down at the beginning of last year, and ever since then I was thinking, what could be next? What could I bring out into the world to remind people of how much awesome stuff DC is putting out, and just share my love and my passion for this fandom and this universe. And so I created this Exploring DC. We're going to take each episode and talk about a thing that we're interested in, either new or old, and just break it down, talk about what we love about it, what we think could be improved, and how it fits into this grander universe. We're also going to talk about brand news, because a new DC Universe on film and TV is launching as we speak, and there's so much to talk about, and I'm very excited. I cannot do this alone, so with me I have two very wonderful co-hosts. The first one is an aspiring filmmaker. Actually, they both are, but one that can really bring some filmmaking expertise, Jackson Wells. Jackson, how are you?
I am pretty good. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm back to my old days of talking about cape shit on the internet. Back to the glory days.
Jackson felt that itch just as much as I did, and I said, "Hey, man, we need to make this happen." And I'm very excited because I think he's going to bring a lot of nuance that I can't bring to some of this stuff. Another filmmaker, and actually in the same area, but one that's going to bring more of a comic perspective, since I'm a bit lacking in that department, which I'm going to change with this show, is my other good friend, Jalen Singleton. Jalen, how are you?
I'm doing really good, man. Happy to be here. How are you?
That's good. I'm so excited, man. I think this is going to be a really great show, and I love to see what our dynamic is. This first episode is on the start of the DCU, the first series, Creature Commandos, written and created by the head of the new DC Universe, James Gunn. Essentially, it is a remix of his old Suicide Squad stuff, but instead of having a group of villains with bombs on their necks, it's a group of monsters that Amanda Waller has to use after the fallout of the Suicide Squad movie. In it, as Indira Varma as the bride of Frankenstein, Sean Gunn is playing dual roles as G.I. Robot and Weasel, Alan Tudyk is playing Dr. Phosphorus and also Clayface, Zoe Chow is playing Nina Mazursky, David Harbour is playing Frankenstein, and Frank Grillo is playing Rick Flag Sr., the father of Rick Flag Jr., along with Viola Davis coming back as Amanda Waller and quite a few other ones. One of the goals with this show that James Gunn talked about was hiring voice actors that were going to appear in live action, which normally is a bit different from the traditional voice acting process of hiring voice actors that are designed just for voice acting. I'm curious what you guys think about that whole idea, because I honestly thought that a lot of these actors did a pretty solid job with the material.
I think that I really, really, really enjoyed. Well, let me say this. Like, going in, I know some celebrity voice actor or celebrity actors for sure aren't great at voice acting, so I wasn't expecting the voice acting to be as good as it turned out being. You know, like especially like David Harbour as Frankenstein, or even like Sean Gunn, even though he didn't really get a lot to do as Weasel. Like that Weasel episode is one of the best, DC things that I think that I've seen. And his performance made me like cry. So I was for sure pleasantly surprised by the celebrity voice acting in this. What about you, Jackson?
I think for me, the people that you expect to probably excel in a show like this are absolutely like the ones that do. I went in kind of expecting Alan Tudyk and Sean Gunn to kind of knock it out of the park, which they did. I mean, Alan Tudyk has such a long and detailed voice acting resume. It honestly might be bigger than his live action stuff. I'm not sure.
I actually wrote it down. He
really?
voiced 11 DC characters so far.
Holy shit!
Wait, what?
I didn't realize it was that
What?
Yep. I
mean, how many is he voicing Harley Quinn alone?
he's voiced 2 in Harley Quinn. I'm gonna list all of them. A lot of them were from the DC animated universe, the modern one from the 2010s. He has voiced the Flash, Green Arrow, Superman, Joker, Clayface in 2 different projects, including this one, and Alfred. And he also in live action played Mr. Nobody in Doom Patrol and Van Wayne in
He's so good in that show.
show Powerless. He's incredible. But yes, Alan Tudyk's been around forever, and he's such a prolific voice actor, and he does great always.
And he's always great in DC. And I think the choice to cast people who can stick around for live action is interesting, and I think it works some of the time. But I thought that there were some performances in Creature Commandos that I definitely fell a little bit flat for me. Specifically, like Gorilla, I thought felt a little off, and I'm really excited to see him in live action. I think he'll do good. Specifically in Peacemaker Season 2, I'm really excited to see what they do with him there. I just thought that just something about the way that Gorilla was delivering some of his lines fell off. And Harbor was also a little... he was hit or miss for me, because there were like some parts where I thought his line deliveries were like some of the funniest in the show, but other times where it felt a little awkward and not the way I think that they wanted it to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I agree. When the concept that he brought up of people being cast to play animated, live-action video games, all that, the initial concern for me was like, oh, are we going to do just big celebrity actors to do the voices, because that's who we want to appear in these big films. And I think Gunn, so far with this one series, did not cast anyone that I feel like was a stunt cast just to have them show up in live action. Even David Harbour, arguably the biggest actor right now, if he shows up as Frankenstein, it would be a mix of CG or heavy makeup. It's not like a Chris Pratt Mario situation.
I would agree with that.
I thought that they did it really well. And I agreed. The weak ones for me were some of the carryovers from the old DC projects. I thought Viola Davis and Steve Agee, who played Amanda Waller and John Economos, I thought they were 2 of the weaker ones, just because it felt like they were kind of...
I agree.
Throwing it in and not really giving it
also
their all.
It didn't feel like they were given much to do in the show, period, especially Economos. He was just kind of there to explain things and make jokes.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That was...
you could have cut him from the show, and I don't really think much would have changed.
Yeah.
He was my least favorite aspect of that whole show. I thought he worked not at all.
Yeah, and that's a shame, because I do enjoy his character in a Peacemaker.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought that they had a nice roster of actors for these roles. But for the characters, what are you guys feeling about this? Because James Gunn has a tendency to do a lot of ragtag members. We did the Guardians of the Galaxy with a lot of unknowns. We did the Suicide Squad with a lot of unknowns. Even Peacemaker itself brought in a lot of lesser-known DC characters. This is his wheelhouse, and I think this one was his most let's go for the most bizarre characters that I can really bring in.
Are you asking, like, basically, like, what do we think about the
what do you think
roster
of
the roster? Okay. When it first was announced, when he announced like the entire like DCU, I wasn't sold. I mean, I thought it was cool. And obviously, like when it first came out, I thought that Frankenstein was gonna be like my favorite one, because I've read the New 52 like Agents of Shade run, which was basically Creature Commandos, but just with the New 52 spin on it, right? But in actually watching the show, Frankenstein was my least favorite character in the entire series.
That's
and I thought that if he would have been taken out, nothing would have changed, like legitimately. But overall, I mean, I think that the roster worked well together. Like, I didn't care about Phosphorus or The Bride or Nina Mazursky at all before going into the show, and I had faith in James Gunn for sure, because of what he's done with Guardians and what he's done with, his Suicide Squad and Peacemaker and stuff, but I didn't expect myself to care as much about Phosphorus or even, Weasel. Like, kind of like I keep harkening back to that Weasel episode was just like chef's kiss, like amazing, But with Frankenstein, a dud for me, for sure.
I get it.
Yeah, I mean, with James Gunn, his biggest strength is taking characters that you've never fucking heard of and like making you just feel such intense emotions for them. I think that's what he did great with Guardians. It's what he did great with Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. And everything he touches regarding comic book media, I think he's really good at pulling out the right characters and adapting the right parts and even changing parts to kind of make them accessible. I think that he did a good job with that again in this series. It was very easy to like all these characters. I again, especially like Phosphorus, Nina, the Bride, G.I. Robot, Weasel. I mean, they were all so much fun to watch. And while he is kind of pulling out some of the same tricks he used on Guardians and Suicide Squad, I feel like he remixed it enough to make it like work again for me. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I was watching it initially, the first episode, my impressions was this was the most James Gunn thing. Like, this is very much in his wheelhouse. Even to a distracting point where I thought that the incorporation of, like, he loves to do those jukebox musical songs just all over his stuff. And I was like, this is maybe too much. I feel like we're just kind of repeating what we've been doing before. But I love the structure of having each character have their own backstory for each episode, because it gave each episode its own unique aspect of it, and that's what I really enjoyed. But I'm curious what you guys thought. This does follow another big series trend for these streaming shows of like, we're gonna do 6-7 episodes, and you know, if the story doesn't get wrapped up fully close to the end, we're gonna rush it in the finale. I'm curious what you guys thought about this whole structure, because I actually thought that they didn't do a great job of like piecing it all together. I felt like it was pacing really well, and then it kind of just never concluded in a proper way towards the end.
I would for sure like agree with that, because that was one of my issues that I had with the entire show as a whole, especially like with the finale. Like, I felt like the mission was building up to be like this bigger thing with bigger implications, not just for the DCU as a whole, but just for these characters and for their story that James Gunn and whoever the other writers were trying to tell. But in the final episode, it just felt like the mission was small. Like it felt like they spent all that time building up, and it was like an upwards hill, and then it just kind of all like fell flat on its face for me. And I felt like I don't know. Well, I mean, obviously, the James Gunn is the person who gives these mandates for episode counts and stuff like that. So I'm interested to see, or I'm interested in what was going through his mind when he was like, okay, Creature Commandos needs 7, Lanterns in the future may need 9 or 10. Like, what for him was that defining factor? And I wonder, does he think that it works in the end, or does he feel like they can go an extra episode, maybe go to 8 instead of 7, or maybe get 1 episode less? I'm interested for sure, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a show that tries to present a lot of complex themes, and it's it was 7 episodes?
Yeah, 7 episodes.
Yeah.
7 episodes, 25 minutes apiece?
Yep, roughly, not even 25 minutes.
Yeah, that's and in every episode, only about half of it is in the modern day, right? So you don't have that much time to flesh out everything. You have essentially a movie's worth of a modern day plot. Yeah. And I would have liked to have seen either longer episodes or more episodes. I would lean towards the latter, because I think that watching Creature Commandos sitting down, it feels nice at a solid 25 minutes. I think that was a good runtime for the show. They pack a lot into those episodes. It's pretty much all killer, no filler. But I still feel like that a lot of the themes felt undercooked by the end. Which is, I guess, you have very well developed characters, because you have all those extensive flashbacks, but I do think it does come at the cost of kind of your main story and the mysteries and the nuances that could have been presented, I think, to that storyline.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I I feel like they really focus strongly on establishing these characters, establishing their backstories, and then with the overarching plot, we kind of just lost track of what we were trying to do. Essentially, what the overarching plot of this show was that the creature commandos are sent into this fictional country called Bakolistan, and they are sent to protect this princess from a actually pretty popular DC villain that I'm excited is introduced called Cersei. Mm-hmm. And Cersei is dispatched up pretty fast in these shows.
Yeah, and they leave her very open too.
Right.
Yeah, they do.
And they take a spin for a couple episodes where they reveal that Cersei is not actually the villain. She was trying to protect the princess, or not protect the princess, but she was trying to protect the world from the princess, who is destined to, become this dictator and kill a bunch of people with a surprise cameo by Gorilla Grodd, and saw a bunch of dead superheroes. A lot of cool stuff. And then, essentially, what happens is Rick Flag is like, no, that's not what's going to happen. I don't believe this. And he goes off and does his own thing, while the other commandos are sent to go kill the princess. And we kind of get a lot of, just meandering around, a lot of banter between Flag and Frankenstein, until it's eventually revealed at the end that, yes, the princess was plotting something. We don't know quite exactly what with Clayface. And that's where I feel like it didn't really have a full thematic explanation of what we were trying to do, especially with, I don't understand what the princess's motivations were.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because her motivations weren't really explored.
Right.
I thought maybe, in my crazy comic book brain, I was reaching for straws, and I was like, oh, maybe Gorilla Grodd is controlling her, and maybe that's maybe he's working with Cersei, and maybe they're building towards something, but it didn't turn out that way, and I guess maybe they could explore that more in season 2.
And that's a big thing to mention, right?
Yeah.
Watching the finale, as soon as they announced that there was a second season coming, I was like, all right, well then they got to change up the structure in season 2. They can't just do the flashbacks every episode again, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry to cut you off, but I also think that something that would have helped the show is having an extra episode where you get a flashback for the princess. And
I agree with that.
Getting to see
that for sure.
her motivations, because I think that they did a good job with Frankenstein, writing wise. They gave him a really interesting flashback episode that didn't make you feel bad for him. It kind of just showed that he was a piece of shit, and I appreciated that, because every other flashback episode, even with Weasel, they tried to make you see these characters in a much more sympathetic light, and it was a little refreshing to have Frankenstein, where they just kind of show that he's a monster. And I think it would have been really interesting to see that with the princess, kind of see her upbringing, because you see her mother in the first episode, I believe. Mm-hmm. And seeing kind of how she was raised, what she was raised to believe in, how she got to where she is right now. That could have been really interesting.
Yeah. Especially with this character, Ilana Rostovic, this country, Bakolistan, these all being original concepts by Gunn, being original characters, Maria Bakalova coming in. I feel like that was... You had to establish a really strong ground for why we're bringing in all these original elements instead of focusing on something from the comics or, a famous storyline. He chose to do something original, but I feel like he didn't follow through with exactly what he was trying to do. And if that's because he was just waiting for a follow-up, I don't know. But the original...
She is dead, right?
She is dead, seemingly.
For sure.
She got shot with a gun.
Shot straight in the dome.
She got shot in the face with a pistol. Didn't she?
Right.
Yeah, she's dead. She's very dead.
Yeah, but with comic book stuff, we never know. It could always be some...
I don't know. It's very rare that a normal person survives a gunshot straight to the face.
So that's what I'm curious about, is that if Ilana's gone and Clayface is seemingly, we can talk about later, going to do his own solo stuff, more Batman focused. What was the setup then? Why didn't we finish the story? What are we doing in the follow-ups material?
Here's what I'm wondering, and this was one of my first thoughts. Is Flag Senior's kind of playing the Coulson role right now, where he's just kind of bouncing around different projects, right? We're going to see him in Superman. I don't think for very long, but we're going to see him. And then he's supposedly a main player in Peacemaker Season 2. How is that if it does, how is that going to wrap back around to Creature Commandos? Like, is Flag Senior even going to be in the next season?
That's a very interesting character to get into, because
Yeah.
in the old DCEU, we had Rick Flag Jr., played by Joel
Yeah.
Kinnaman. He was in a very poorly received Suicide Squad and was one of the low points of that movie. Then they
He
bring
was
him back
terrible
for
in that movie.
terrible, right? To be nice, we bring him back for the Suicide Squad.
He's great.
And Gunn completely like revamps his character,
Oh,
makes
he's
him a lot more
awesome in that.
humorous, and he's like you have this death scene in that movie, and it's like it's very effective, and so much so that it guides that whole Peacemaker season, where
Yeah.
people were like, I don't know if I want to follow Peacemaker. He killed Rick Flag, and I liked him. Then they bring in this Rick Flag Sr., and it's played by Frank Grillo. Essentially, Gunn was like, I want to work with Frank Grillo on a project. Let's, bring him to be this Rick Flag archetype.
Yeah.
I feel like so far they haven't done enough to distinguish him from why like he's so different and why he's so much more, or what he brings that Rick Flag Jr. didn't. Because right
I
now
would
he just
agree with
feels
that.
like
Yeah,
a very
I
much
would
like a
agree.
replacement, and especially with how they end the season with him not leading the Commandos anymore and him going to do stuff with Superman and Peacemaker. I'm curious, like, is this a character we actually have cool plans for, or is this just like my buddy Frank Grillo wants a character? Here's what I can do.
Well, my interest in Flag Senior has always been like his. I think he's going to be much more interesting in Peacemaker season 2, because I think you'll get to see kind of a more bitter side to him, and that's a side that you never got from Flag Junior. And I
Yeah.
feel like because I think a defining characteristic of Flag Junior in the Suicide Squad is that he's kind of he's incredibly empathetic towards Task Force X, right?
Yeah.
He kind of has a underlying respect for many of them, and by the end of the movie he's willing to just completely not betray but like go against Waller's orders
Right.
for what he sees as the greater good, and I think Flag Senior is instilled with a lot of those same characteristics where he kind of has this underlying empathy in him towards all of the Commandos. And it does just kind of feel like the same basic setup as they gave to Flag Jr., which is why I'm interested to see him, because it seems like he's arresting Superman in Superman. So like I'm interested to see how they portray him in there in Peacemaker.
I'm also interested to see, because obviously where we end Creature Commandos is that Rick Flag went against Waller, and granted, while Rick
He
Flag
got fucked up too.
was exactly so like while he was proven
he got his ass whooped.
while he was proven to be right, I wonder, like, for him, does he just go back into Waller's clutches? Just like nothing happened. Does he just go back to following orders? Is he working for someone different now? I also know that James Gunn talked about like jumping through the timeline for a different DC project. So does Creature Commandos take place after Superman? Does it take place before Superman?
It's before.
It's before. So
Gunn
like
said it was before.
how does he end up where he ends up? Which I mean I guess we'll see. Well, actually, will we see? Because I'm sure not that much time will be dedicated to Flag Senior in Superman.
I think he's just gonna be there.
Yeah,
Honest to
exactly.
God,
That's
I
kind
think
of
he's just
what
gonna
I'm
be
thinking.
kind of a military lackey. That's just kind of like there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we're like, if I'm being honest, we're probably gonna see Waller in this movie too, right?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Like
so.
if I had to put money on it, like
Right.
it would
Yeah.
make sense. I feel
Yeah.
with everything we know about it.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I think Viola Davis is very much locked into whatever our plans are for this universe, and
Yeah.
she's getting her own series. She's probably going to be in more Peacemaker. Her daughter.
Yes, she was in Peacemaker season 1.
There's a lot of Viola Davis, coming up, and I think that brings an interesting thing of Argus and Waller and Suicide Squad were all like little pieces of the DCEU, the old universe that
Yeah.
we had, but they weren't the overarching thing where they didn't bleed into Justice League, didn't bleed into BVS. I'm wondering with Gunn and that being one of his like favorite subsections right now, will this become a similar, counterpoint to like Shield in the
I
Marvel
was wondering
movies?
the same thing.
And especially with kind of like the dismantling of some of Amanda Waller's stuff and the Suicide Squad at the end of the Peacemaker season 1, I'm curious, like, what that government organization's role is going to be, like, in a lot of these projects, especially with Gunn at the helm.
Yeah, you could kind of use Argus as that Shield's kind of counterpart a little bit, and have Amanda Waller be the Nick Fury, and everybody else, or Flag be the Coulson of sorts. But I think that he might be trying to use them more from an antagonistic lens.
I agree with that.
And really kind of touching on the downside to governments, and how, I mean, because like when you look at the Justice League, they in the New 52 they did have like a liaison or whatever, but they have historically been known to be like an individual operation of sorts. Like they kind of answer to themselves. They help the government, but they're not like a part of the government, or they're not as closely tied to the government like the Avengers are to Shield.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that with the way that Gunn wants to touch on like real world issues, like the political climate of the world, I think that he would definitely want to play Argus more in that antagonistic government lens to the superheroes.
No, absolutely. I think they're,
and I also
bring
just
a lot of...
I would agree with that, and I also don't really see Argus playing too much into literally every other project that's been announced. Like, they're not going to be in Woman of Tomorrow.
Right.
I don't really see them being in Lanterns. They're sure as fuck not going to be in Sergeant Rock. Unless Argus existed back then, which I don't know. Did it?
I don't believe so.
Does Argus run that far back?
I highly doubt it.
That'd be a question for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I highly doubt it. Because Sergeant Rock, or that whole, or the Easy Company, they were all way before Argus. I think the Argus truly came into play because of the Dark Side attacks.
Okay.
So I don't think they're gonna play. But I will say
they can always change it too.
Yeah, I will say that James Gunn did say in the synopsis for Lanterns that the mystery will revolve around superpowered individuals just popping up in a city that Jon Stewart and Hal Jordan have to go investigate. So
interesting. Well, I guess it could play in that.
Yeah, so I could see Argus definitely being.
I forgot that it's Earth based.
Yeah, exactly. So I could see like Argus definitely playing into that more, being like, okay, so there are now more metahumans popping up. We have Superman, who is now making himself more of a presence. Let's try to get our hands on this, or let's try to rectify the situation early, so then we don't just have more metahumans just out here wandering around with no supervision. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'd like to steer it a bit back to the actual Commandos team. I think one of the most interesting things for me, I don't know how well it was executed, but I thought bringing in both the Bride and Victor Frankenstein, or just Frankenstein, was a really interesting dynamic, because obviously there's a lot of inspiration and history from the Universal Classic Monsters and Mary Shelley's book, and Gunn actually said that they focused more from Mary Shelley's book than the Boris Karloff movie and some of the old Universal stuff, because they wanted Frankenstein to have more of a dialogue and more of a personality instead of like the lumbering Frankenstein. But that is a big part of the Creature Commandos in the comics, is Frankenstein leading this team and being a part of everything going on of Shade. I thought it was interesting to not only not have him be a part of the team in this show, but to have this kind of like love chasing aspect with the Bride, where it's played for a lot of comedy. And it was a really interesting spin that I don't know fully worked. I think there was concepts that worked there. I actually thought the Bride was a very standout character, which I think got intended with her being kind of the main focus. And Harbor is an interesting like supporting character, but it's interesting that they took a essential leader of this team in the comics and made him his own unique thing in this series and in this universe.
Yeah, for sure. Like I definitely agree with you on the whole. For me, everything about Frankenstein just did not work. Like his motivations were just annoying. Like every single time he came on screen, I was like, ugh, like please, like let's go back to the Commandos, or let's go back to Flag or to Waller or to Cersei. Like legitimately every other character was infinitely more interesting than Frankenstein to me. But I am interested to see how they kind of bring him into season 2, if he's even in season 2.
I imagine he would be.
Yeah, or like how do they continue this same cycle with him chasing the bride, even though the bride clearly doesn't want him? You know.
Yeah, Jackson, you seemed like you were more of a fan of this character and kind of like some of what Harper was doing. What did you think of what they did with that character and the bride?
Yeah, I liked him. I liked the episode with the bride where he is that montage of him of her just like killing him throughout time.
That was funny.
Really, really fun. That was a
Very
great
fun.
scene, and you can see Shaggy in the background,
Which is a whole thing.
something that people seem to be reading way too much into. Like,
Yeah.
I've seen people like debate like how canon that is, and I just think that's so funny for something. That was
Well,
just,
when you
like,
bring in a
the
character
Easter
like
egg.
Shaggy, you never know what the power levels are going to be.
it screws everything up.
The whole universe.
Oh my god! But I mean, as I did not hate Frankenstein as much as Jalen did. I was more just kind of like mixed. There were times when it worked for me. I would be more curious to see what they did with him in season 2, just because I feel like they kind of have to switch it up
Right.
and do something a little bit different. I would be, because as you mentioned, he is the leader in the comics, which I definitely knew before watching the show. I was fully aware of that,
Right.
and yeah, as many are, and so I would be curious to see how, like, if he gets a redemption arc or something like that. It would be
Yeah.
interesting to see Gunn try to add some more empathetic elements to him after we've spent a whole season where he's portrayed as kind of a bumbling dumbass and kind of a horrible person. He's not portrayed as the smartest guy in the world. So it would be curious to see just kind of what angle they take. He doesn't have a lot going for him right now, you know?
Yeah.
Right. It's an interesting way to do it because a lot of this season was him repeating the same cycle of chasing the bride around. And I also thought, again, in the finale, he shows up and it's like this big buildup of like, I'm going to see the bride again. He gets knocked out and he's out for the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
And we get a little post-credits tag of him talking to someone about it. I think they have a lot of potential with the character, and I think Harper is a really versatile actor when he wants to be.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, we can't keep doing the same note again. We have to do something more interesting. And Jalen, maybe that's where they bring him in, like, some of his comic personality and some of, like, his leadership skills.
Yeah, because, like, you know, in the comics, he's, like, a badass. You know, like, like in the comics, he has, like, a chainsaw, and, like, he just go, like, he is ruthless. Like, that is the Frankenstein that I thought we were getting, you know? But, I mean, I just hope, kind of like you said, Josh, like, I hope that in season 2, if he comes back for season 2, I hope that we don't just make him as one note as he felt this season. Like, just like, you know, it felt like there was no depth to him other than just chasing the bride. It seems like he only existed because to explain the bride's existence, you know, and like kind of, they just kept stringing him along because they saw that as like a funny tag or whatever. It just, for me, it just didn't work. And if they want to continue that storyline in season 2, I think you just gotta find a way to I guess, like, pivot, you know, and make him more interesting or make him more tied into the story. Maybe, you know, have Argus get their hands on him and recruit him to the team and play more with that dynamic of the bride and Frankenstein instead of just having it be like the bride kills Frankenstein every time she sees him or tries to kill him. Like, actually build deeper into that relationship, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jackson. Finish.
I agree with you. Everything you just said, Jalen, and as you said, Josh, I think David Harbour is really versatile when he tries. You know, he's really great in the original Suicide Squad movie. I thought he was so good in that.
Yeah.
I forget he's in that.
So did I. I was looking at the voice cast for the show, and I was like, David Harbour was in this.
Yeah,
the
he
old
was.
DCU.
Right? It's easy because he's just like a fucking prison guard, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, was that
Characters-
pre-Stranger Things?
His character's name was called Dexter Tolliver, and he was basically just a government aide.
I don't know why that name is funny to me.
Dexter Tolliver.
Dexter
from the
Tolliver.
comics?
From the
Can we-
no.
let me look-
Please look that up because I don't know.
Tolliver?
T-O-L-L-I-V-E-R.
There's a picture. There's a picture of
Yeah.
David Harbour. I don't-
Pre-beard David Harbour as well.
Yeah,
which
no, that is
not
pre-beard
something you see very
David
often.
Harbour. Okay, no, apparently he is in the comics.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh no, wait. Never mind. I think he's original to the.
Okay. Interesting.
But I think he appeared in comics afterwards. I'm going on a weird side tangent here. Sorry. Yeah, no. But on a serious note, like I think David Harbour is a good actor. I would like to see more of the character. And I think he'd play a lot better in live action too, with
Yeah.
Harbour
I agree.
specifically.
Jalen, I like that you mentioned One Note because a One Note character I loved, I thought was great, was Sean Gunn's G.I. Robot.
Yes.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
So good.
this character that I was like, I don't know what Sean Gunn is going to bring, especially because he's just James Gunn's brother. Like, what are we going to
Yeah.
do here? It's this robot from the old 1940s, 1950s, and its
Yeah.
sole design was to kill Nazis, and
Exactly.
that's basically the only note that we expand on. There is in his solo episode, it's a lot about him looking for friendship and looking for connection. But at the very end, his mission, his like sole desire, which is so funny and so interesting,
Yeah.
I thought played really great. And honestly, the biggest disappointment for me with him was that they took him out of the season so soon because I
Yeah.
thought he was really one of the strong
Yeah.
points of the team.
Sean Gunn was so good.
He was.
I watched the opening credits. It had Sean Gunn as G.I. Robot, and I think after watching the first episode, I forgot it was him because it sounds nothing like him. Like
Yeah.
I've seen Sean Gunn and stuff. He disappears into that, and also he has like the best needle drop in the show when in episode. Geez, the third episode was his, right?
Yes, cheers to the Tin Man.
Yeah. That where the coin operated boy, I think that's the name of the song, plays, and he's just mowing down the Nazis, and they're kind of storming the castle. That was so much fun. I loved that.
Jalen, how about you? How you feel about G.I.
No,
Robot?
I absolutely love G.I. Robot, and like that is a G.I. Robot is an example of how you do a one note character and give him like one sole motivation, but you do it well. You make it engaging. You make it you make it compelling, and you just make us love G.I. Robot. And kind of like you were saying, Josh, like I think my only complaint with G.I. Robot is that he was taken out of the game so early.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
but even like for me as like a DC fan too, like even that episode having the having Dr. Magnus, you know, like
Yes.
a Metal
We'll
Man
definitely have to get into all
reference.
those like
And that was
connections
Tudyk, right?
and stuff. That was Alan Tudyk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like that
Um,
was cool, but yeah,
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. I thought Sean Gunn did a great job, especially nepotism considered. At the end of the day, another character he did was Weasel, which was a carryover from the Suicide Squad. Very one note in that movie where he's just a little freak.
He's
He's
dead in the
apparently
first
killed
10
a bunch
minutes.
of kids. He's dead, and then he comes back. My concern going into this was that it was going to be more of the same, where he's just like a dog character.
Yeah.
But again, I thought Gunn did a really good job of like bringing that one note character and giving him backstory and giving him depth to. I really
Yeah.
felt for him, and especially like even backtracking on those. Oh, he killed all these kids. Making that the focal point for his backstory was like a really brilliant move. I thought on the writing part.
Yeah, I would for sure agree on that. Like playing into like our expectations and being like, oh, this is just some fucking dog, you know, like why is he on the team? Why are we rooting for him? Why should we care about Weasel? And giving him that backstory, and not even just giving him the backstory and making us feel for him, but also connecting to his connection to the princess, like why he protects the princess, you know, because she reminds him of the girl that he failed to save. Like that to me was like a brilliant like full circle moment for Weasel's character. And ironically enough, Weasel turned out to be like, I think my second favorite character, which I did not expect.
Who was first?
Going in? It has to be Phosphorus for me.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, Phosphorus was awesome. But yeah,
And I liked also. This is just a quick sidebar. And we were talking about the finale earlier. I liked that they just killed Nina and she's just dead.
yeah,
She doesn't really die for anything. I really, really like that decision.
Yeah.
Because she's the only one that is permanently dead by the end, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Of the
Yeah.
core team.
Yes.
That's a character we'll have to get into in a second. But Jackson, did you have any thoughts on Weasel and that backstory and all?
No, that was my favorite episode of the show as
There
well.
you
I
go.
thought it was brilliant, and that's also the episode where we get that really crazy scene of like the vision sequence, right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, where we see all those
Yeah.
characters lined up and dead, and Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman,
Flash.
Blue Beetle is flat. and
Flash
it's-
is in there.
Yeah, all these characters that they say are there that I didn't really see.
exactly.
Peacemaker,
Yeah, it's pretty packed. Really quick, I do want to touch on the last two members just to cover our bases here. Alan Tudyk, Dr. Phosphorus, we got a backstory for him where he was trying to work on this stuff to save diseases, and then he was under the pressure of a crime boss. I'm blanking on his name. At the moment.
Rupert Thorne.
Rupert
Thorne.
Thorne,
Yes.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Off the
And,
dome is crazy. But
It becomes a very Dr. Manhattan situation where he gets stuck in
Yeah.
something and then he becomes radioactive and he takes his revenge. That was a character I thought was kind of in the background for the beginning of the show,
He
and then
was.
he became stronger towards the end. Again, Alan Tudyk is incredible as always, but yeah, what did you guys think of him?
can I? And while we're on the topic of Phosphorus, can I just shout out the porn animators that did this? They are, because all right, so, that sounds weird to say that, but so do you? All right, so you guys have seen. Jalen hasn't. Josh, you've seen Invincible, right?
Yes, Invincible.
So you know those they dropped the teasers for those seasons, and the animation is a little different. Everyone's like, "This looks so much better than the actual show."
Yeah.
And there was like this hashtag that went on for a while that was like hashtag bring back the porn animators, because I think that the studio that did that mainly does adult animation. This is a weird tangent, I know, but these are the guys that animated Creature Commandos.
Yeah.
And I thought the animation in this show was really, really good.
Yeah.
It was very tight.
It was kinetic. It like the fight scenes, especially with Phosphorus, and that's why I'm bringing this up now, because I thought he had just some gnarly kills in the show.
Yeah.
Like there was one specifically where I think a tank was driving towards him.
That's the
and
one.
He just kind of like sticks
Yeah.
out his hand and just like melts the faces of
Yes,
everybody inside.
yes.
And I was like, yeah, that's the stuff right there.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
An interesting thing with Phosphorus and his animation is that they actually use an effect called, I had to look it up, called the Kirby Crackle, which is based on Jack Kirby's designs for characters like Silver Surfer, where what happens is they do a lot of these like black particles around the body to create a sort of like negative space and to really amplify the energy that Phosphorus is kind of giving off. And I thought that really, like, again, like the tank scene, a lot of that stuff, it really made his powers look kinetic.
Looked awesome.
Right.
Yeah. And I also thought the writing for his character, like the comedic timing for Phosphorus was maybe better than any other character in the show.
For sure.
Because even with like, I thought sometimes when the bride would try and crack jokes, it felt a little out of character. I was like, there was a specific line in the finale where she was like, zip it, Ghost Rider. And I was like, she doesn't know who the fuck Ghost Rider is. she does not know who that is. But I thought with Phosphorus, like every single quip or joke felt like the right thing for him to say.
Yeah.
And his backstory was perfectly tragic. I like how brutal, his revenge kind of cycle was. Some of those kills, there was like there was one where he just touched gasoline, and it just lit this dude on fire. And I was like, yeah, it's really brutal, and you can see why Batman showed up and probably knocked his teeth out. You can see why Batman had to put a stop to him, which I appreciated.
For sure.
Jalen, how about you? Because Phosphorus, Gunn said, was his idea to bring the most obscure, like, out of the normal roster of the team. Because Frankenstein, Mazursky, G.I. Robot, a lot of these characters normally show up in the Creature Commandos, but this was one he was like, I need to bring someone in that's very unique and new to the team to make it feel fresh. Did you like his inclusion and everything?
Yeah, so actually, like Phosphorus was one of the team members that I actually knew the least about going into. I mean, I knew he was a Batman villain. I knew he was like one of those, one of those like like D level Batman villains, like the man eater or mineral eater, whatever that half dinosaur
Mineral
half.
Eater?
It's something like a half
Animal,
dinosaur, half
vegetable,
man.
mineral.
Yes.
man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
that
he's a
one.
Doom Patrol villain, right?
Yeah, he's a Doom Patrol villain. So like I knew
I
that
love Doom
Phosphorus.
Patrol villains.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like I knew that
We're
Phosphorus
going to ramble
was.
about Doom Patrol villains.
Right. You could go on.
You
Did
could.
did they ever do? God, there's like this dude that's like just like a pair of pants. Like he's just legs. I don't remember his name. He's just legs and he smells really bad. Those are like his two defining characteristics. And he's a Doom
Right.
Patrol villain. I
Well,
love
not
the
to
Doom
get
Patrol.
too far into Doom Patrol, but they did a whole season of characters that were essentially just butts, and they walked around with like fang teeth.
Amazing. Amazing.
That's why we love Doom Patrol. But yeah, like so with Phosphorus, I didn't know like much about him, but getting his backstory, was like amazing. And even the one of my favorite moments in the show was where he was gonna kill that little girl, or where he was gonna kill that little girl's family, but she reminded him so much of his child. And just like the scene of I forget what the line was, but where he was playing with the little girl outside and the girl's parents ran out and they were both like panicking, being like, "Oh my god, what are you doing?" And
I love that scene.
And Phosphorus is just like, "Oh, we were just learning how to fly," or something along those lines. Like, it was such a small moment, but it spoke so much to like his heart and to his motivations, to who he is and who he was before Rupert Thorne did that fuck shit to him. But
Yep.
even I guess like on that episode, I love on Phosphorus and kind of on the show as a whole, I love how the show was contained in itself, but it also still had wider, world building with the DCU, like with Batman, like our first introduction into the DCU Batman, or even earlier, like Jackson was talking about in the Weasel episode, like getting our first glimpse into some of these DC superheroes and getting a glimpse into the future of maybe what the DCU is headed to, or maybe what it will touch on at some point. Like, I just absolutely. love that world building about the show.
And right before we touch into that, I do want to get on the last character, Nina Mazursky, who I didn't know if she was a comic character or an OC going in, because she didn't have a superhero name, or supervillain name. And I thought they did a really cool job with her, where she's kind of this passive character and kind of is like the optimistic one of the group. And then in the last episode, you see her tragic backstory, where she was just a human with some birth defects, and it eventually, experimentation led to how she is now. And even they gave her the most brutal ending of all, where they kill her and they don't come back. And I don't think it felt like too much of a punching bag, but it very much felt like a very tragic character that Gunn was trying to do. So that was one that I didn't expect to like as much as I did going in.
It established some stakes, for sure. Like
and also, it bouncing off of that, Jalen. It established stakes, but it also, I think she was meant to remind you a little bit of Ratcatcher. Right?
Oh yeah,
I
can see something.
didn't even
Very
catch
similar.
that. Yeah.
Oh really? Yeah. I mean, the whole time
that.
she really reminded me of Ratcatcher, and which is why I found the fact that they killed her so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I agree. Ratcatcher was the villain in the Suicide Squad, which played a very similar role. Danielle Melchior. It was a dynamic that I think the show needed to bring Nina in, and I'm curious going into the next season with her gone, who is going to fill kind of that void in the show.
Yeah.
Which
King
I
Shark.
guess, King Shark is definitely gonna fill that emotional role. Which, speaking, I guess Jackson mentioned earlier something about the show kind of not being able to fully tell a complete story because we were doing so many flashbacks.
Yeah,
I worry about that a little bit for season 2 because we have so many new members. Like, we have King Shark, we have the mummy person, we have the vampire. I believe her name is Nocturna. Like, we have like 4 new members to the team that they're probably gonna have to have a backstory. So I wonder, will there be still, I guess, storytelling faults where we aren't able to connect as much with the story as we are with the characters? You know, like, we connected with Nina, but even though we could, I guess tying this all back to Nina, I connected with Nina a lot, but I wish I would have gotten a little bit more of Nina before that gut punch. You know what I mean?
Well, I think another thing to note on what you just said is we don't really know, how long it's going to be till season 2.
Yeah.
I mean, animation takes a long time. I mean, we saw how bad. Geez, it was like a 2-year turnaround time with the first season of Invincible, because I don't think that they were working on this. I did not get the vibe when Gunn made the announcement that they had done much work on season 2 so far. Because if you don't know how traditional animated shows work, I don't know, like The Bad Batch or just like many of those other animated series that air year to year, they are probably working on it for 3 years before they announce it. And by the time season 1 comes out, they're already mostly done with season 2.
Yeah.
And when you don't do that, it leads to just a ridiculously long turnaround time because animation takes forever. It is such a time-consuming process. So in that time, between now and the next Creature Commando season, we are probably going to get maybe close to 10 DCU projects. So there's a lot of room, and there probably will be crossover, right? Especially in Superman and Peacemaker. I would not be surprised if we saw other people from this besides Flag.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's just interesting because the status quo of the DCU will change so much before then.
Yeah. An interesting thing I saw looking into the show, the showrunner is Dean Lorey. He worked on a lot of comedic shows for DC, like Harley Quinn and Powerless.
I was about to say, yeah.
And Gunn, at the end of the creation of this season, said to him, hey, I want to do more, what are we thinking? And he needed Dean Lorey back because that's what he wanted to work with. And so he kind of was throwing around the idea of either doing a follow-up movie or doing a follow-up second season. And they ended up going with a movie. So they ended up going with the second season, but that kind of reads to me like they were unsure, towards the end of are we doing more? What's the plan here? And I think, we are going to see a big wait, and we are going to see a lot of projects coming out. And the challenge there is going to be keeping people engaged in staying interested in these characters and peppering them through other projects.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been 2 years since Gunn took over, right? A little over 2 years.
Roughly, yeah. It was the end of 2022.
Okay, so when he took over, I think he said the first thing he did was greenlight this show, if I'm not mistaken. So I assume we'll see a similar turnaround time for season 2, if I had to guess.
Yeah, roughly
That's
2
a little,
years.
Yeah.
It was the success of Peacemaker that kind of spawned this show because they wanted Gunn to work on an animated project that he didn't kind of know what to pick. And this show kind of just was an idea of his. And he wrote actually the whole season as a bunch of spec scripts without actually having a contract to I
remember
have this show planned out. And then he got a green light once he had hired. And I think as good as the animation is, I think 2 years is a nice turnaround for something. Yeah. And hopefully they can get, since they already have a lot of stuff established, they can get it done even faster than that.
Yeah, and I was to say, I'm hoping that, because if they're doing season 2, I would imagine they're already thinking about seasons 3 and onwards. So I'm hoping that that's something they're already planning. So that way, when season 2 rolls around, there can be a little bit less of a turnaround time with season 3. I would really love to see that.
Yeah.
Right.
No, yeah.
Before we dive into all the fun angles and tie-ins to everything, there was a couple other things of just the actual show that I wanted to talk about. One, I thought the music overall was pretty good. We brought back Kevin Kiner and Clint Mansell,
say that. Yeah,
who did the Peacemaker series. Jackson, you're a big music head.
I was about to say, I meant to bring this up earlier when we were talking about the needle drops. Because I love Kevin Kiner. Kevin, Sean, and Dina, all three of them.
Who did a lot of the Star
Wars.
Show. Yes.
Yeah, they did Ahsoka, Clone Wars, Rebels, Bad Batch. They're the Star Wars TV guys and gals. I would have liked to have, because I feel like with these, specifically with Peacemaker, they didn't really get that much time to shine. And I thought the needle drops worked really well in that show, so it didn't bother me. And obviously Clint, he's worked on so many DC TV shows, so many, because he was on Doom Patrol Titans, right?
That would be a good question. I know he was on Doom Patrol.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but,
he's been around a lot.
I would have liked to have seen just their score be a little bit more prominent because it's kind of just in the background for most of it. But yeah.
Yeah, Jalen, was there any like technical elements of this show and the filmmaking that stuck out to you?
See, I am not a technical person whatsoever. I kind of leave that to Jackson and leave that to all the other people who I know. But I will say the needle drops were phenomenal. Like kind of like playing more into like how goofy this team is, but still using the score to the stories, you know, for the purpose of the story. And especially the needle drop during the GI robot kill, or even the needle drop during the montage of the bride killing Frankenstein. Like all that stuff was used expertly, in my personal opinion.
Right. Yeah. I think the last thing we'll get into, like I've been holding you guys back, but all the connections, all the setup.
Yeah.
Like I didn't feel like they fully brought the season home, but what I thought they really did well was establishing all these like little pocket parts of the DCU.
Yeah.
There's to list a lot. We have Cersei and the world of Themyscira, which obviously ties into Wonder Woman, a big character that everyone wants to see. Mm-hmm. There was in the GI Robot episode both Will Magnus, who leads this team called the Metal Men, which is a bunch of robotic characters, and also Sergeant Rock, who is rumored to be getting his own film project that is reportedly greenlit. We could get into that. We see Batman in the Dr. Phosphorus flashback episode, and that's a whole debate of who is playing that character. Is it going to be Pattinson? That's a whole thing. We saw a bunch of the dead heroes in that vision sequence. We saw Superman, Peacemaker, Starfire, Hawkgirl, a lot of cool stuff there.
Forgot about Starfire.
Right, and then at the very end, we see, which we will talk about too, the setup for the new team of Creature Commandos, which has the Bride, Weasel, Phosphorus, GI Robot in a brand new, like, hulked out form, Nosferatu, the vampire lady, Khalees, the mummy guy, and King Shark, now not voiced by Sylvester Stallone, voiced by Diedrich Bader, which is the whole thing. But I don't know where you guys want to dive in first. Jackson, what do you think?
I thought it did about what I expected it to in terms of, like, setting up this broader DCU. Because I think everybody kind of figured Superman would be like the big thing where you kind of get a very good idea of how this world functions.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And Gunn has said that. Like the Creature Commandos, and I think it's better for this, is self-contained for the most part. Yep. Like you can contain everything you just listed to like 2 or 3 moments in the show. Broadly speaking, like you have the big hero thing where you see all the dead people. And you see Batman twice, but they never show you his suit because they don't know what they're doing.
And done really well.
Yeah. And that Batman, we could spend hours probably talking about the whole Pattinson Batman debacle.
Yeah.
But I think it sets up an interesting world because it sets up a world where heroes are just kind of normal, right? It's not
really cool.
It is. It's interesting because that also doesn't function like the MCU, where I feel like there's a little more weight to it. And I guess if we're gonna talk about like just all the projects that are in development that like you can kind of tie back here, like Clayface and stuff, I would be really because Clayface is interesting to me specifically with how Flanagan described wanting to do Clayface and how he's presented in this show. It feels like 2 completely different things.
It does. It does for sure. Which I think even on that, since there have been like 4 or 5 different Clayfaces in the comics, there was one from like the 60s or from like the Golden Age who is just an actor. He doesn't have like all the clay powers and stuff like that. Like he's just someone who can act really well, and it's kind of like a con man. So if they are, I guess conform to that thing of jumping across timelines in the DCU, they could, make it in the 60s or the 50s or the 40s or whatever and truly go into that Clayface and make it grounded. Because, I mean, I think the film has like a $70 million budget. Like, not a lot of money.
I think if I'm remembering, the number was $40 million.
Jesus, like that is an indie movie budget. I don't know how well you can do like a big ass, like mud creature on $40 million.
He described it as he said it was like a horror thriller tragedy, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that it makes Clayface out to be kind of a more sympathetic figure, but he is a stone cold killer in this show.
In this show, yeah.
Yeah, so it would be interesting to see if they set him up to kind of go down a darker path or what the deal is. And you also have the Sergeant Rock movie, which, just for context, Luca Guadagnino, who's the director, he directed Challengers, Call Me By Your Name, Queer, all these other movies. He has 8 projects in development.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I just think that's interesting. But
yeah,
I would like to see it happen. I think it would be really interesting.
Absolutely. I think what you guys bring up about Clayface is interesting because how they kind of framed it to me was Mike Flanagan came to Gunn with this script, and he's like, hey, I really want to do a Clayface thing. He's kind of been talking about doing something in the DC universe for a while, and Gunn was like, well, if the script is really good, we can greenlight a project. But then I'm watching Creature Commandos, and Clayface plays kind of an integral part into the plot in the show. And, you know, you see him playing Mortal Kombat, and then he gets to fight Rick Flag and Frankenstein, and then it's revealed that he was working with Alana. It makes it feel like it was a lot more set up than what Gunn kind of makes it out to be with him getting his own solo project. So I'm wondering if he was, like, set up to be a part of maybe the Batman movie that they're going to do, or something along the lines of that.
I honestly, because the way Gunn has described how he's worked with the DC stuff so far, I honestly do think Flanagan just dropped the script on his desk and was, like, pretty pleased with the cherry
which is
on
what
top.
I think so.
And I like that approach a lot because that's obviously not how the MCU works most of the time. Usually, if you haven't if you don't know too much about it, like for Thor Ragnarok, for example, they wanted to make another Thor movie. They interviewed different filmmakers to kind of hear their idea on what their vision was, and they went with Taika. But with the DCU, it seems like they're having. While they are doing that, where they have a project that they know they want to make, and then they go and find the right people. They're also just having filmmakers come drop ideas on their desk. Yeah. And I think that's allowing for some really wacky, weird things. Like, we're getting a Clayface movie before a Batman movie. And I think that's kind of cool. And it's going to be our R-rated horror movie. That's kind of sick. And I think that's... Because I think that also plays to a strength that DC will have over... Not to keep comparing it to Marvel, but it's like you kind of have to talk about how the MCU operates because it contextualizes what Gunn is doing. Yeah. And I think having a more filmmaker-driven process is really, really cool.
Something I've always loved, especially of the old DC EU, the popular movies that everyone got to see, a lot of people did not like how nothing tied together and everything kind of felt very separate. That was something that I thought really brought me to the universe and brought me to this franchise over like a lot of these other franchises that I thought there was a lot of cool, unique visions. You go from Aquaman and James Wan, it's heavily stylized, and you go to Birds of Prey with Kathy Yan, and it feels like a completely different tone. And then you go to David F. Sandberg with Shazam, and that's like a very much like big but superheroes. And you get all these different things, and none of it really ties together. But something that I hope they continue to do with the new DCU, maybe with a little more connections, is to keep that filmmaker love, keep that flavor variety, because that's something that I think it can really make it stand out against every franchise, not just MCU.
I would agree with that, but with the old DCU, and I know we're probably going to talk about this more extensively down the line, I like the diversity in tone, I like the diversity in look, like how films are shot, the aesthetics of it, and how it's written. Like you look at BVS and you look at Shazam, they feel like two completely different things. But I wish that there was just a little more oversight into the actual world building of that universe, because it was to the point where like, in Black Adam, there's this kid who has a bunch of superhero like posters on his wall, but they're not superhero posters of the Justice League as we see them. They're just pictures of them from the comics and stuff like that. It was always off-putting for me, because I was like, I know what Superman is supposed to look like here, and that is not him. That is a picture of a comic book, and I'm aware of this, and it's really fucking with my brain. Yeah. So it's like in this universe, it's like I would just like to see because there's that whole thing where we had that stream of faceless Henry Cavill cameos. Yeah. Where you would see Superman but not his face. I think it literally happened 3 times, which is crazy. I would like in this new DCU to kind of keep that diversity in filmmaking, while also having more of a consistency in the world building, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I'm really interested to see with this new universe is, because obviously they aren't going that everything is separate but some things connect, like some things within certain projects connect, because
Yeah.
obviously you have Creature Commandos connecting to Superman in the way of Rick Flag Sr., and then that connects to Peacemaker, and then Peacemaker probably connects to Waller. So like your first few projects are connecting in some way or form, right? But I'm interested to see like for the more indie projects like Sergeant Rock or like Clayface, you know, how will Luca Guadagnino and how will Mike Flanagan
Yeah.
kind of go about that, you know, side of things, especially with a Clayface that is more artsy, that is more indie, going into a Batman movie that is more fantastical. You know what I mean? Like how will that tone and stuff work?
Well, even with Lanterns, you look at Lanterns, and like you would think we would see Guy Gardner in there at some point, right?
Yeah, and I mean,
One would assume.
and I mean, I know we obviously haven't seen Superman yet, but the way that he looks in Superman is very it's very comic book.
I
It
love
is
the
very-
haircut.
Yeah, no,
I love it. I think it's so funny.
Yeah, I absolutely love it too. But like, you also look at that Guy Gardner standing next to a badass Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler, and
Yeah.
and I'm
Kyle
sure.
Chandler's so what a good-looking man.
Yeah, because like, I'm sure that the show is going for that. I'm sure that Lanterns is going for that more serious, true detective,
Yeah.
like tone, and then you throw Guy Gardner in there. I mean, I know they just casted a Sinestro, you know, so like they're truly going for that cop drama side of things. So I'm more so interested in like how they are gonna have that connectivity in tones, and how certain characters who are portrayed as this tone in this project, how they'll go into something where the tone is so different, you know.
And I will say that's also something that Marvel never really got to do, because like, you know, if you look at the MCU, the thing that sticks out is Daredevil and all those Netflix shows, but they never got that crossover with the MCU in those shows. And I think that the DCU will have the benefit of you know, making a more grounded thing and having those fantastical elements kind of bleed in a way that's really cool. Because I think that you can make those, you can present fantastical elements in a way that can be taken seriously by the audiences. You know, fantastical doesn't need to mean goofy or silly. Like, you can do a mystical Batman that is still kind of has that gritty, real tone to it. Although I don't know what I would hate to be the guy that figures out what they do with Batman in this universe.
Me too.
I just
Right.
do not envy the person. Like, I don't envy Gunn in that regard, because
Exactly.
there's a big Matt Reeves size elephant in the room.
Yeah. But, I mean, to tie all this back to Creature Commandos, I think one of the great things that the show did was it made itself grounded at times. It made its story very believable and real. Some of the inspirations they talked about, besides obviously the Universal Monsters, was this manga called Go-Go 13, which was essentially just a very serious assassin story. And it really felt like that when they were talking about like everything to do with killing the princess or going after Cersei. It felt like it was a lot more to the point than maybe some of his other Suicide Squad stuff was. Another inspiration was 1960s war films, which you see a lot of in the G.I. Robot stuff. And to bring it overall to like what I'm hoping for with the wider DCU, I think this show does a great job of like, hey, let's bring in all these elements, let's bring in all these different things, the Metal Men, Sergeant Rock, all these like monsters and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a grounded story and it works really well and it feels believable, which when you have like Frankenstein and Weasel, that's a big accomplishment, and that's something that I'm hoping to see more of.
And also to bounce off of that, going back to like the influences, I think Gunn is one of the few big directors working within the comic book, you know, space in film and television that has, like, I feel very distinct filmmaking influences every time he's behind the camera. And I know he didn't direct any of this, but even in its writing, you can tell that there's Gunn is like influenced by the history of cinema. And I feel like you watch a lot of these big comic book films and you just kind of don't feel that. You don't really feel like that there's a style that is distinctly influenced by certain movements or by certain, you know, genre waves from the past, and I like that. Like especially with the Suicide Squad, more than anything, you can really feel where Gunn got the inspiration for a lot of that film from. And I really love that. And even you can see trends with how he changes how he shoots with the camera. Like, so a little bit of a side tangent here, but like in Peacemaker, he really experimented with these kind of wide-angle lenses during the fight scenes. And that's something that carried over to Guardians, and that's something that if you go on Twitter and search up Superman, everybody's arguing about that in Superman. Like that one shot they posted of him flying where the lens is super wide and close up to his face. I think it's interesting that his filmmaking actually sparks conversations about filmmaking in these projects. Yeah,
it's something that that's really unique, and I think honestly no gun project I've gone into has never felt like there's always something to it that he's bringing, and that's like why I'm excited for him shepherding it. As much as I have my concerns with like all that he's bringing in and all that we're doing, at the end of the day, it's a guy that knows film, it's a guy that knows comics, and that's a killer combo, and that's one that's like something unique that some of these other studio bosses just don't have. But I was gonna see. Do you guys have any closing thoughts on this show before we kind of just go over some of the projects that we have coming up? Because I wanted to do a big talk about the future of DC.
I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. It is nothing earth-breaking for me, and I know I talked about some of the issues I had, but it was a very beautifully animated 7 episodes that I every week I woke up. It aired on Tuesdays. If I'm not mistaken,
Thursdays, right? Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Every Thursday I woke up and I was like, I put it on and I was excited, and I think that's nice. I like having TV shows to look forward to. It makes my week better.
I think like as closing thoughts for me with Creature Commandos, I went in having little expectations for it, which is kind of like, okay, this is like a precursor. Let's just go ahead and get to Superman, and I ended up enjoying it more than I thought I did. I mean, some aspects could have been better. I mean, as we all know and as we all talked about here today, but overall, I'm excited to see where all of these characters go. In the wider DCU. So yeah.
I echo a lot of the things. I went in, I was like, okay, is this Suicide Squad light? Is this like something James Gunn's super passionate about? But, as someone that loves a lot of what he's done, that's wearing the Suicide Squad shirt right now.
That's sick.
Because that's one of my favorite DC movies of recent.
It's so good.
It is. It's awesome.
Sorry to cut you up, but I watched it again just right before Creature Commandos with my girlfriend. And I think that was her first DC EU movie as well. And well, no, she saw the original, but regardless, I was just like taken aback by how much I liked that movie. I liked it even more than I remembered liking it.
Yeah, it's an incredible movie and doesn't get enough love. But yeah, I thought Creature Commandos did a really good job. I was always like on the train of like, why are we starting with this? Why can't we start with Superman? Like, let's do a clean cut. Yeah. But at the end of the day, this isn't going to bring in a lot of new fans, but as someone that's like an established fan that is a nerd, like this is something that I think if people discover it, and hopefully they do, they're going to be like, yeah, this is sick. Let's do more. But let's get into what they're doing, because obviously a big thing, without getting too much into it, because I know a lot of conversation has been echoed a lot, they're doing a new thing called the DCU, which is taking elements from the DCEU. There's projects like the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker and basically anything that James Gunn did. And it's like we're tying over story elements to it, but it's not exactly canon or connected. It's just like, hey, we're following up on things that we liked from that universe. And so it's kind of become a weird mix of people are confused of what exactly we're doing here with this new DCU. But we're starting off with Superman, which will be something we can kind of end on and talk about. And we're going to have Peacemaker Season 2 this year as well. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on, like, kind of the blend really quickly of, like, DC, EU, DCU.
Gunn described it in a way that made a lot of sense. The simplest way he put it, because I felt like when he first announced this, he was describing what's canon and what's not in a really convoluted and confusing way. But like just a couple weeks ago, he described it in a very just point blank way, where he said, you know, Rick Flag Jr. didn't die on the beach, or didn't die, trying to expose Project Starfish because it happened in the Suicide Squad. He died trying to expose Project Starfish because it was mentioned in Creature Commandos. And that's pretty much the simplest way. It's just, if it's mentioned and it's shown, then it happened. And
Right.
And here's my thing. It's like, it is a little frustrating just to like my nerd brain, where it's like, yeah, why don't you just cut it off? Why don't you just start fresh? But at the same time, I know for a fucking fact, if I were in his position, I'd do the exact same thing. Like, there is no way. If I spent, 3 years of my life, 4 years of my life making this show and making this movie, and I got control to reboot, I wouldn't want to let my friends go. I wouldn't want to let those characters go, these people that I cared about. I'd do the same thing. So I can't really fault him for it, but it does make it a little more confusing. Although I will say Creature Commandos did warm me up to the idea.
Mm.
Yeah, and
Yeah, how about you, John?
I think for me, I am kind of like Jackson said, I'm over here thinking with my nerd brain, like my comic book brain, and I wish, and of course, like, I am fully open to the idea of, and I fully have faith in James Gunn and in making everything work and not making it feel convoluted in certain ways, especially with like the Flash and how earlier he said the Flash was gonna be the reset and Blue Beetle was the start of like the prologue of the universe, kind of. And now that's obviously changed to where Blue Beetle and Aquaman are both part of the DCU, and Creature Commandos is a true prologue.
Aquaman
in the Lost Kingdom.
Huh? That's canon?
No.
Wait,
Like,
what are you talking about? I was like, wait, what?
Bro, originally when he first made the announcement, he was
okay.
after Flash,
I get you.
But
Yeah.
Playing,
I remember that video.
So at first, I was like, okay, like this is weird, and then obviously with them doing a Peacemaker season 2, and obviously how Peacemaker season 1 ended with the Justice League playing into it and having it be Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa. So it's an easy fix, but in my mind, I was like, I wish we would have just did a clean sweep. Like, no actors from the old universe are coming in, and if you do the same actors, have it be different. Like Viola Davis, I can understand not letting her go because that's Viola Davis. I wouldn't let her go.
I would have kept her no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. I would have kept her no matter what. But making that character a little different, maybe a different story, maybe a different motivation than she had in the DCEU, like slightly different. I mean, I know it is still Amanda Waller at the end of the day. But at the same time, I am open to seeing what Peacemaker Season 2 does, because Peacemaker Season 2 is the one that I'm the most iffy on. And I'm sure Peacemaker Season 2 will have the most answers for us when it comes to how the DCEU
I would agree with that.
And the DCU are, tying together, if or not tying at all. So I have faith, and I'm interested to see what James Gunn does with Peacemaker Season 2 specifically, and Waller, because I think Waller will be a big one as well.
My biggest concern was always that, I'm going to be weird about it. I'm going to be the nerd. I'm sure other people are going to be a nerd and be like, this doesn't really fit in with da-da-da-da. My concern is that the DCU was crumbling.
Yeah.
Everything was falling apart. Projects were financially flopping. And I hate to see DC lose. I hate to see stuff not do well. Filmmakers not have stuff that's well received. My concern was that if we're tying in all this stuff before that's not exactly working, are people going to be like, oh, I don't want to get into that. This is just more of the same. And then we get stuff where Superman doesn't do well, and then other this stuff, and then it just fades out of existence. But at the same time, I know a casual audience member is going to watch the Superman trailer, and at the end of the day, be like, that's not someone I recognize. That's a new Superman movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to go see it. And they don't care about the nitty-gritty of fucking John Economos showing up. It doesn't matter to them. It's at the end of the day, they're going to see what they want to see. They're going to see stuff that's interesting. So I'm okay with it, but I'm curious to see, if it does alienate people at all. And I think the only way it does would maybe be some of these TV shows that they're going to do of, a Peacemaker or Creature Commandos, of people being like, I don't really need to check that out. That's not,
Dude, can I be
top
honest?
importance. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So, a good gauge that I have for what general audiences who are the target of these superhero shit, my dad and my brother. They're two people that I use to gauge this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They have not seen well, my dad has not seen Peacemaker. He has not seen Creature Commandos. He will probably never watch either of those.
Yeah.
But also Peacemaker's weirdly popular, and I think that's something worth noting, that was like a very sneakily successful show.
Yeah.
It did really well on Max. But
Absolutely.
aside from the point, my dad does not give a shit about the status of the canon of the original, James Gunn Suicide Squad or anything. And I think that's going to be the case with a lot of people. I think like a lot of the casual viewers are just not going to think about it that hard, because why would they? It's a very niche topic to argue about. And I think, when you see that Superman trailer, its only purpose and only motivation is to make you feel that kind of intense love for the character and that sense of optimism. And I think that is more than enough to win people over. I think that, and I also think, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would go as far as to say that Superman is probably, I don't know that there's a movie with more riding on it than Superman.
It's a lot. It is a
lot.
It's a big investment, and that'll be something that we can talk about, of just how much this universe is going to ride on Superman. I did want to touch base on just a few couple projects, because we're doing this Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters. They're doing a similar thing to the MCU, maybe a little bit different approach. We're doing a lot of these projects. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts on some of them are. I'm just going to list a lot of them, because we don't have time to go through everything in depth.
Yeah.
We have the initial slate had stuff like The Brave and the Bold, which is a Batman movie, which is going to bring in the Bat family, and that's interesting.
Andy
Swamp
Muschietti,
Thing,
scrap it.
Andy Muschietti, not a great director. Swamp Thing, we have James Mangold with a mixed track record of late, but it's cool because that's a very horror-inspired thing, which is kind of why we're also excited for Clayface. Again, Mike Flanagan, a horror-inspired director. We have The Authority, which feels very much like a Creature Commandos project, where it's like, I don't know what this is really appealing to. That one's a little more concerning for me because it's a movie, and it's like, how is that going to do? And then
it's also
there's
probably
stuff like,
never coming out.
Yeah, there's stuff on the horizon. There's stuff on the horizon very soon. Like Supergirl has a release date. We have the Green Lantern show, Lanterns, which has like a production start date.
That's my bread and butter.
We have a lot of these shows. Even Waller, Booster Gold, Paradise Lost. There's so much in development. What do you guys feel like? Do you feel like they're tackling the right things, or do you think they're just kind of going for stuff that Gunn wants to do?
I think Gunn is green-lighting the scripts he thinks are good. He said that. They announced a bunch of projects, and like only 3 of them got off the ground, because Gunn has said, like, I don't think the other scripts are good enough to green-light, and that's a great approach. I love that.
It is.
And I am really excited for Superman. I might be a little bit more excited for Supergirl. I am like ridiculously. I love that comic. It is so good. And like the fact that they're so confident in the script that they already hired the writer to write a Teen Titans movie is crazy.
Yeah.
And I think Rob Hardy is such an inspired pick for a DP. He's worked on. He's just a beautiful cinematographer. I think he's really going to bring that art to life in a really vibrant way.
Yeah.
And
Jalen.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Yeah, Jalen, do you feel like they're going too niche with some of these things? Should they be doing a Wonder Woman thing, a Flash thing again, or is like Swamp Thing and Clayface and all this like gonna be appealing to people?
So I think if each script is as good as James Gunn says it is, then I think that eventually people will just, we the comic audience and the regular audience will both be like, all right, just give me more DC. Like, I don't care what it is. I don't care how it connects to the story. Just give me more DC. Like, you have, you know, you're getting a Green Lantern Project who is one of the OG, or who are, you know, always members of the OG7. But then right after you get, you know, you get a Supergirl project. And then right after you get a Clayface project. Right? So, like, if everything is hitting on all cylinders, people are like, just, you know, just give me more. But I think that tone can prove to be an issue if they don't play it right. Mm-hmm. And that is the only thing. It's a minor thing, but as we see with the MCU, it does prove to be an issue where certain tonalities, like say the tone of Creature Commandos, the tone of Superman, the tone of Peacemaker, the tone of Waller is all one way, and then you veer off of that with Lanterns. or you veer off of that with Clayface, how will that make general audiences, like the film audience, how will that make them feel? You know, but at the end of the day, it's not about that. It's just about telling good stories. You know, and kind of like Jackson was saying, like Lantern, like how excited he is for Supergirl. Lanterns is that for me, because like Green Lantern is like my favorite comic book anything, like in DC ever. Like I love Hal Jordan, I love Guy Gardner, I love. Yeah.
I'm
audio listeners, he's showing off Blackest Night, which
sorry.
The Green Lantern comic.
Yeah, that is the like that is the comic that got me into DC. Right there is Blackest Night, yeah, and I mean it's such a weird comic to get into DC because it's so big and it's like an event, like an ending event, which we can talk about later on in another episode about comics and stuff like that. But I think that Lanterns and having Aaron Pierre, who I absolutely love as an actor, having Kyle Chandler, who I didn't like at first as Hal Jordan, but I have faith in it. You know, having Sinestro, who is my favorite DC villain, be included in this. You know, like I am just so fucking excited for Lanterns, but I guess tying it all back to what I think about like the niche projects and the mainstream projects. I feel like it can all work as long as these scripts are as good as James Gunn thinks they are. You know, time will tell for sure. That's the only way time will tell.
And give Wonder Woman an animated show, please.
That would be awesome. At the end of the day, what drew me to DC, what had me run that DC TV Center account for so long was variety, right? Like we had all these different universes. We had the Arrowverse, we had the Titans universe, stuff that wasn't good, but we also had Doom Patrol, and we had Harley Quinn, and we had all these awesome stuff. And I think what I love is that even though this is a brand new thing, even though we're trying to emulate a bit of what like the MCU is doing by having like a big plan and all this, they're still doing that variety. This year alone, we're still getting stuff way outside this universe. We're getting a Harley Quinn season 5. We're getting another Batman Ninja movie. We're getting an Aztec.
Wait, what?
Wait, are we?
We're
getting another Batman Ninja movie?
Batman Ninja movie?
Batman Ninja, which was a Japanese-inspired Batman movie from 2018. We're getting a follow-up to that coming out in March.
I didn't know they were doing a second one. That's cool.
But yeah, even outside of those...
I didn't know there was a first.
Right.
Is it good?
Exactly. That's a question.
Is this why I haven't heard of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But even like My Adventures with Superman, which I love, the Batman Cape Crusader show that a lot of cool creators worked on, the Sandman, which is ending now, and that's a whole topic. But like, it's just cool that they're even though a lot of the stuff ended, the Arrowverse ended, a lot of the DC Universe shows ended, the DCEU ended, they're still bringing a lot of variety, and they're still bringing something that I don't think Marvel brings, which is like
absolutely.
And a lot of even franchises in general, the wide scope of things. I'm getting a lot of DC, and I'm loving it. And that's like, this is, again, the perfect time to start this show. I just think there's a lot around, and it's awesome.
Yeah, Star Wars is the closest thing you have to this. And Gunn has even, I think, gone out of his way to point that out, that, you know, you have stuff like Rebels and Andor coexisting, and even like having storylines that bleed into each other. And I love that way of storytelling, and I would hope to see, like, it's really exciting getting an adult cartoon like Creature Commandos that actually has kind of darker moments to it, because I feel like you don't get much of that in just entertainment, period.
It's not just raunch.
Yeah, it's not just raunch, exactly. And I would love to see some, like, cartoons aimed towards maybe younger audiences as well, because I think that's something Star Wars really benefits from having. And again, I know I kind of mentioned the Wonder Woman thing jokingly, but it's kind of insane that she has never had a cartoon ever.
Yeah, it would be.
It's never happened, and I think like now is the time to do it. Like, seriously, we have a Kite Man show, and I'm the number one Kite Man fan. Let's give Wonder Woman a show, and because you know, you mentioned, like, you know, how do you feel about the niche characters versus, like, the big ones? And I love having niche characters, but it's like, I still want to see The Flash. I still want to see Wonder Woman. I still want to see all these big characters.
Absolutely.
And, I know they're doing the Themyscira show, but, like, I want to see Wonder Woman.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I want to see Wonder Woman. That's just...
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. Do we feel like this is very early right now. A lot of stuff hasn't happened. A lot of stuff hasn't been filmed. Do we feel like this is going to be similar to franchises where it's like it's all leading up to something, it's all leading to an event film? Or do we feel like we're just kind of going to be hanging out? Because honestly, I would not mind that as long as it continues to be fresh and interesting.
I think that with this, and that is a question that I've racked through my brain so many times, that will we be leading up to something? Will there be like a big bad? Like will it be Darkseid? Will it be, anybody else? And James Gunn did make a comment when he first announced that Lanterns would set up the big bad of the universe. Now, I know a lot of things have changed since that first announcement to now, so I don't know if they are still thinking of a big bad at all. I actually think that it could be a thing of like the comics, to where we may not be like, it won't be like an MCU thing where an entire saga, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I think that you will sprinkle a big bad in certain projects, but it won't all be like a tie-in. It won't be like a phase 1 or anything like that. Like, it'll all lead to an event film, maybe like but not calling it.
Do you think they'll do Justice League?
Yeah. So I feel like they will do Justice League, but I don't think that the big event film will be called Justice League Crisis on Two Earths or something like that. I think if they do decide to do like that, it would just be called Crisis on Two Earths.
Wouldn't the funniest possible thing they could do would be to build the Crisis on Infinite Earths again? I think that's the funniest outcome. That is the funniest outcome.
That would be
if they do all of this insane. Only to do Crisis again, that would
be upsetting.
That would be very upsetting. But I mean, I feel, and that's another thing too. Like, I feel like, and I talked about this with one of me and Jackson's friends. His name is Luis. I talked about this with him, but I'm thinking that Chapter 1 is kind of like a saga into itself, or like how me and Luis were thinking was that Chapter 1 is like a saga unto itself, and not like it won't be a thing of like Chapter 1 is this, Chapter 2 is this, Chapter 3, because I mean we have so many projects that are announced. Chapter 1 is going to be like 10 years, till all this shit releases.
I think he's already forgotten that he called it Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters.
Yeah,
he has not mentioned that
agree.
once since that fucking video. I can't lie.
I for sure agree that Chapter 1 is just a saga. If internally he is still going by chapters, then this Chapter 1 is just a saga unto itself, and that's the story that they want to tell with the current DCU. And if this works, they'll go into a Chapter 2 and name it whatever they want to name it, tell whatever character stories they want to tell,
Go from there.
Yeah.
Right.
Josh, you think they're doing Justice League?
I think the Justice League name has a lot of stigma around it, a lot of Zack Snyder
I don't
around
think they're going to do it.
A lot of old universe, and I think, again, let's see where this stuff goes. Let's see how things land. And that's what I want, because I know we're running long tonight. I want this to be the final thing we talk about to go into. Superman's coming out in July. Peacemaker Season 2 is coming out in August. These are the two big projects. Mm-hmm. How do we feel like this is going to land for you as a fan, like personally? Like, what is your excitement level? And then, like, how do you feel like it's going to be successful? Because Superman, a lot of stigma around it. It's a character it's gone through a lot. People are like, not like, I don't care about Superman.
He's
this
so
isn't
boring.
A super marketable thing. Right. Exactly. So this is like the big comeback for both the character and then the launch of DCU. Peacemaker, it's a complete like bring over from the old universe. Like, this is very much relying on knowledge of previous stuff. I'll start with you, Jackson. Like, how do you feel like these projects are gonna land for you? And then, like, how do you feel like, is this gonna be a successful year for DC? Do we feel like we're gonna really launch it off strong?
I have a good feeling about Superman. I have a really good feeling about Superman. I think this is gonna make the Superman movie that makes, because like I've talked to people. I'm not going to name names, Abby, that have been like, I don't really know if I find Superman all that interesting, and they've seen maybe like a movie or two, and they haven't read the comics, right?
Right.
And I am on my knees begging whoever that this is the movie that finally fucking stops that, because Superman is the superhero. He's the superhero. Yeah. And this trailer looks like it's doing a lot of things right. And specifically in something I don't even think the Reeves movie fully nails, as good as it is. I think it's really going to nail that Lois and Clark dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Rachel Brosnan just looks perfect in this.
Yeah.
I mean, all three of the leads, Lex, Lois, Clark, they look perfect, and I am beyond excited to see their dynamics because, you have Guy Gardner, you have Hawkgirl, you have all these characters in this movie, but like at the heart of it is Superman, Lex, and Lois, and I am so hopeful that this is going to be the movie that finally does it, that finally like gives Superman the mainstream respect he deserves. Because like the fact that like I don't know, fucking Thor has higher stocks in most households than Superman right now is kind of crazy.
It's
crazy.
Yeah.
And
not that Thor's
like,
bad. I love Thor, but
yeah. Do you feel like Peacemaker is going to be a strong continuation? Do you feel like it's gonna bring a lot of people in?
I think because again, the first Peacemaker season was more successful than I think a lot of people realize. I think there were a lot of people who tuned into that wouldn't normally watch, comic book stuff. I know a couple people who just watched Peacemaker because they like John Cena, and that was it. And
that's all you need.
yeah, exactly. And I think season 2, I enjoyed season 1. I'm sure I will enjoy season 2. I'm more honestly, I'm curious to see how because with season 1 you have that Justice League cameo at the end, but like going into season 2 of Peacemaker, I think Gunn is gonna have a lot more incentive to cross stuff over, and I'm always curious to see people work in that kind of like raunchy, darker Peacemaker tone. I think you can do some interesting stuff with the writing. Yeah. So yeah, I'm curious to see kind of what a person. I also hope I didn't love the whole alien angle of season 1, and I know that was like the main plot, but I'm hoping in season 2 they keep it a little more street level. That just like appeals to me a little more. I found in season 1 the plot line with his dad to be the most compelling part.
Yeah, I think they're gonna do a lot of. I think it's gonna be a good continuation. I think him bringing it back is a strong sign that he has ideas and love for this show and these characters. Jalen, how about you? You feel like Superman and Peacemaker, this combo is gonna work this year for like broad audience and for you?
I think that both of them will have two different purposes. I think for the broad audience, right? I feel like Superman is, for me, and for the broad audience, that's like that thing to get people into this universe. Like, this is the thing. Obviously, we have the Terrifics or whatever they're calling themselves, that group of superheroes in this movie. Yes. And apparently Mr. Terrific plays a big part in this movie. And then you have, obviously, your main three, Superman. And in the comics, they do have a name. That's terrific. But I don't know if it's... I don't know if they're calling themselves the Terrifics or the Justice League International. They both share kind of the same members. So it could be either one. Okay. But they, obviously playing on the big three, Superman, Lois, Lex. And like Jackson was saying, the tension between Lois and Clark is exactly what I've been wanting from a Superman project since Smallville. There's
that shot in the trailer of them just kissing.
Of them kissing, and I love that. I love that. I absolutely love that shot. But because like Lois and Clark are like the definitive relationship. I mean, along with Peter and along with Peter and MJ, and even in recent years, Peter and MJ have been like shunned by the public.
Editorial hates them, bro.
But like Lois and Clark are the definitive comics couple, all around. Mm-hmm. So to get that dynamic right, to get Superman right, to get that hope, that thing that Superman stands for, to get that right. I have faith in this movie. Financially, I don't know if it'll do too terribly, like blow it out the water, but I think on a phenomenal fucking movie standpoint, I think that it will do that. Peacemaker, I think kind of like Jackson said, I hope they do go more street level. I hope they do go more like I hope they don't do another alien angle or something that now in my comic mind would make me think, why isn't Superman handling this? Why isn't Superman coming into this? Because I found that in certain comic mediums like the MCU, I do that a lot, or like a lot of comic fans do that a lot. Like, why aren't the Avengers here? Why isn't this happening? So and even in season 1 of Peacemaker, the alien stuff started small, but it grew bigger to the point where I was like, why isn't the Justice League on this, or why don't they see this, and why aren't they? And I mean, they eventually did, but it was too little, too late at that point. You know.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think that playing into the more street level side of things. Also, I'm a huge Green Arrow fan, and I saw an actor recently post Green Arrow and was like, 2025 is happening. So I hope that Green Arrow is at least a part of this series. I'm not holding my breath for it because I know that Peacemaker is a Green Arrow villain, but I hope to see my boy Ali.
Wait, what?
Peacemaker is a Green Arrow antagonist recently.
I
And
was today years old when I learned this information. I cannot
And this
lie.
is why we have a show called Exploring DC.
Yeah.
I didn't know
everything
this.
about DC on a
yeah,
Well,
Peacemaker.
but he wasn't originally a DC character, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, no, he wasn't originally a DC character,
Okay.
and then in like the '80s, I believe, they brought him in, and in recent years, he has become actually since the show and the movie boosted his popularity, he has become more of a Green Arrow family villain to the point to where now if you go online and you look up Green Arrow family, there's like a cover with Peacemaker with the Green Arrow family. You know, that's how big Peacemaker has grown.
I forgot that Green Arrow has a family.
Yeah.
And I've seen that show, and it's like they're all there. I do
Yeah.
hope that if they do Green Arrow, which I honestly really want them to,
Yeah.
I just need them to not do like. I feel like they made him too much. Josh, I mean, you could speak on this better than me, but he was the Batman stand-in in the CW
For
shows,
real,
right?
yeah.
he
for
was
sure.
he was not very much what Green Arrow from the comics was, and that's where I think a lot of what the DCU can do is like take a lot of these characters. The public perception is a lot different than what their actual like comic persona is, and Green
Yeah.
Arrow is one of those characters. Yeah, for sure.
So how would you say that like in the comics he differs from the show?
I think in the comics he's a lot more played up, kind of like Iron Man, where he's like a playboy philanthropist, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of the Robin Hood aspects. Where in the show, it's like I have this trauma, I have all this past experiences. I am Batman, and here is like I'm gonna take vengeance against everyone. But if I
Yeah.
go down an Arrowverse rabbit hole right now, I'm gonna take forever. I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts on Superman, Peacemaker, everything
My
before I kind of wrap things up.
My final thought on Peacemaker is that I think that the purpose of Peacemaker for the general audience is to explain why the DCU is now a thing, and the DCU we're just throwing all that stuff out. That's
Yeah.
my last thought, and I think that it is as well gonna be great. Final
Yeah.
thought.
Any last thoughts, Jackson?
So in season 1 of Peacemaker, there is a newspaper on the wall that says
Ooh.
that new hero Peacemaker takes down Kite Man, and I just really hope that that's still canon because I mean this so sincerely. I know the only reason Gunn didn't put Kite Man in the Suicide Squad was because of the Harley Quinn show, and I need him to do it anyways because have you read the War of Jokes and Riddles, either of you?
Mm-mm.
I haven't.
Not currently.
I have not read it.
His storyline in that is so fucking sad. And I was like, oh my god, I didn't realize that they could do this with Kite Man. If you haven't read the War of Jokes and Riddles, it's a weird comic, but like the Kite Man stuff in it is really genuinely really good. But I all of this to say, I kind of hope they keep leaning into weird stuff.
Yeah.
I like DC's weird. There's a lot of really weird concepts in there, and I'm glad that they seem to be leaning into that. And I'm excited. I was nervous at first, but like the more we've heard, especially with Woman of Tomorrow, which is a weird comic in its own right, I'm getting excited. I think that they might have finally cracked the formula. They've been trying to get this off. This is take 3, right? Because they tried to get it off the ground with Green Lantern. They tried again, and then failed. And then they tried to like soft reboot it in that universe near the end. So I'm excited. I am excited to see them go all in on this, and I really do hope it's a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
and-
one more, I guess
Okay.
like correction on the Peacemaker Green Arrow thing. He's not a Green Arrow antagonist, but he's more of a Green Arrow rival. I just checked to be sure. But recently he has gone more into the Green Arrow world of things.
I did not know that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. But yeah, that's. I still think that Peacemaker is gonna be great, and I think that Superman is gonna be great. And like Jackson pointed out, like I think that's a beautiful point. This is the third try, third time's the charm, and time will tell where we go as DC fans.
It's not gonna move like the Dark Universe.
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, to close it out, I mean, I'm a DC optimist. I think Superman's gonna be fantastic. I love how it's gonna be a very different tonal shift for the character and bring it back to kind of like what I like about the characters in the comics and from these animated shows and stuff. I think Peacemaker is gonna be fun. I hope they fine tune the humor a little and make it something that works for everyone. But I mean, this year is gonna be emblematic of what this show is. I think it's just a good opportunity to get people into DC, to broaden horizons, and to really like do something unique that I think that DC is like primed to do, and it's something I'm really excited about. And I think this show, all the things we're gonna explore while we wait for these new projects, is gonna be really fun. Listeners, thank you for listening to this thing. I know it was a really long one, but we had a lot to talk about, and I had a great time talking to you guys. I think
absolutely.
I'm so excited to keep going. Next week, tentatively, we are planned to do a little movie called Batman 1989.
Oh boy.
Tim Burton's
It's
big
a beautiful one.
piece that kind of really brought a lot to the superhero genre before it exploded in the 2000s. We'll talk about it next week. Thank you for listening, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day or night.
All right.
Bang.